With God, there is always more. More love, more life, more freedom. Welcome to Zoe's Exploring More with Michael Thompson. C.S. Lewis once wrote, "Our Heavenly Father has provided many delightful inns for us along our journey, but He takes great care to see that we do not mistake any of them for home." Join me and the team as we explore the kingdom together, discovering the deep truths and offering encouragement for the journey. There is always more. Welcome, friends and allies, to the Exploring More podcast. I'm Michael Thompson. I'm with S.J. Jennings, and I'm excited, man. We're going to talk about warfare.
Yeah.
Do a three-part series on warfare.
Maybe 4. We'll see how it goes.
We'll see how it goes.
Yep.
There's a lot to talk about. And I think, listeners, the reason why we want to talk about it is because it doesn't get talked about
Yeah,
a lot.
that's the truth. Yeah, if you are a regular attender of church and your church talks about the kingdom of light, the kingdom of darkness, warfare,
Satan,
demons,
demons.
his emissaries, all that, that's a rare thing.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
And yet, depending on the theologian that you talk to, is just the New Testament alone, what the percentage of passages through the Gospels, through the epistles. Obviously, Revelation has its own spiritual realm, heavy, but, there's 25%, give or take, of the scriptures that talk about really warfare-related things.
Yeah.
You start adding the false self in there, which we'll talk a little bit about, the battle within, you're going to up the percentage, but that's how much warfare there is in the scriptures.
The first thing that comes to my head when you say that is directly speaking about warfare. Yeah, but I think it's all
the context. Great point. And that's why we want to talk about it.
That's right.
Because, we ask questions in our community, in our friendships, like you guys do out there. And that's, why is this happening?
Right.
What's going on? And it's a great prayer. It really is a great prayer. And hopefully we can be helpful for the next couple podcasts at bringing some of that into light. And so we thought we would kind of outline this and see how it goes. And so to talk about warfare, what we thought would be a progression of these next few weeks would be, number one, the larger story. Let's talk about that today. And then let's talk more about the internal battle, wounds, vows, agreements, the false self, and the conflict that we wrestle with, the warfare in that. And then lastly, this may take 2 parts for it, but we're going to talk about the dark kingdom, demons, foul spirits, kingdom of darkness, and particularly what that's like. What's that about when we address literally foul spirits in this physical realm? What's that like?
Yeah.
And try to dispel some of the crazy that's associated with that, but also shed some light on the darkness that this is not that crazy. There's a reality to the movement and the work of foul spirits and how that works. So we'll kind of start up at the context, 40,000-foot view. If you have a spiritual realm context in which you see and hear your life, then you actually are giving consent to the larger story that your story's in. And that's probably our favorite way to say it, really. Do you know the larger story that your story's in? Do you know what's going on around you, the context of your days? And so that's what we want to commit the next 20 or so, 25 minutes to exploring, is the larger story. And then we'll just kind of descend into your story and how this war has actually affected and infected you. And then we'll talk about the agents at work against us. And I think that'll be a good introductory series, right? On warfare.
That's a good, it's a good place to start.
Sounds like ABCs and 1, 2, 3s,
it's
but
just not.
It's a lot bigger than that.
I mean, when I think about warfare, Michael, I think about a couple of different things. When you speak to someone that's been in combat or been in an extraordinary, intense situation, whether it would be military combat or it would be first responder entering into a raging fire or a police officer doing CPR on a baby, you hear them share those stories. And if you haven't been in that situation, whichever it might be, you're kind of like, okay, wow, that sounds pretty intense, but is it really that intense? Is it really that nerve-wracking, or does it really take place on that kind of a level? And I think what I want the listeners to understand, and I want to process verbally as we're sharing, there's so much going on that we can talk about in terms of spiritual warfare and the larger story. And yet there's so much of it that God, in his kindness and mercy, shields us from.
Yeah.
I mean, if we could see what was really going on, and we get glimpses, what we want to talk about is helping our listeners and each other to become even more aware of what's going on and be able to see more and more of it.
Yeah.
But if we could see it all, our heads would pop.
Well, and then we'd start throwing around our weight.
Well, yeah, right.
I mean, once you're taken back and then you realize, okay, wait, I got a badge.
Right.
I
got some
armor.
authority. I got some training here. Yeah.
So I love that you went there because, guys, why are you talking about this? Why? I would love to stay shielded from all this. I would love to stay in some kind of safe space, some neutral Sweden or Switzerland. It doesn't exist.
Right.
This is
not at all.
This is fallenness. This is where we live.
Yeah.
And we're not here to blame everything on darkness and Satan, but we're here to understand how this works. And that's why we wanted to have this conversation and explore more about warfare. How does it work? What's it like? Especially if we're going to play our part in the kingdom. And that part involves being part of the rescue, bringing the weight of the kingdom, the power and the authority with us into any circumstances, taking authority. I mean, one of the things Jesus really was about was bringing the kingdom and showing us how it worked and what it looks like to bring the kingdom authority. And then he, in turn, shares that authority.
Right. John 17.
Right.
Yeah.
He says, now all authority, Matthew 28, now all authority, not all worship, not all praises, now all authority in heaven and earth has been given to me. This is very important. Where was it? Well, that's what we're going to talk about.
Yeah.
You know, and more so as this progresses, to then share that authority with us, it means a couple things. One, we must need it. And two, we've got to learn how to wield it. We don't have to walk around flashing our badge, but when, right? Remember why we wrote Heart of a Warrior? That when evil raises its head, good men will know what to do.
Yeah, beloved sons, warrior men.
Know what to do and do it well.
That's right.
So this is part of, I'm not even going to say a campaign we're on in terms of, you think politically, I'm talking about military campaign. Our team is on that. We live in this space, and it's very, very helpful to talk about it and to share the experiences and to have an orientation about the larger story and how it works, because it just makes us more dangerous in it.
Yeah, and I would say too, Michael, this is not rookie boot camp. I mean, you got to learn how to wear your uniform, how to make your bed, understanding your citizenship, your rank in the kingdom, understanding how all that works really comes first.
Yeah, all those disciplines, they shave your head and put you all in the same outfits to just kind of take your former life from you. This is why Paul tells Timothy, don't get caught up in civilian affairs. I mean, those 2 letters to Timothy are like from a general to a captain.
That's right.
If you read them like that, they will become far more clear. He's not just talking to him about how to do church. He's talking to Timothy about how to fight well, how to battle. Don't get caught up in this. Don't get caught up and entangled in this. Be careful. Pay attention. All of the things that you tell people when there is stuff around them that could encumber, impede, even imprison the soul, the mind, the body, the heart, all these things. So this is why we want to talk about this. And so, SJ, what's your experience? You brought up church earlier, and we've been on a lot of missions together in a lot of spaces. Just last week, we were with a bunch of men. Describe what you see and hear when we bring up and ask an audience the question, is there evil? Is there Satan? Is that the opinion of the people that we see?
Yeah, I think that has been taught. I think they've been taught that there's something out there that wants to get them, wants to undo the good in their lives.
Something's
There's
not
an
right
evil
with
force.
Yeah, something's not right with the world. And then what? But
they
then
understand that, but then it just about ends right there in terms of most folks' understanding
Yeah.
of how it all works.
Have you ever seen those forms that we initial and sign consent?
Yeah.
The 4 pages that you just flip over?
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
okay, just where do I sign?
Yep. Oh, whenever there's an update on my iPhone, please read all these.
Yeah.
Does anybody out
Yeah.
there, if you read those things, please email us at exploring more.
Because we have a
at
cash
zoe.org.
a cash prize
Yeah,
for you.
because you're the guy that actually reads those terms and conditions.
And you know
I
what those
mean-
terms and conditions do say? They're permission
Yeah, oh yeah.
to use your platform, use your phone identity.
That's how when I search for something on Amazon, then it pops
It
up in my,
knows.
it
Yeah,
knows.
it's crazy.
Because you're giving it permission to know those things.
Oh
But
man, that's a whole.
It's a little creepy.
All right,
but,
add that to podcast number 5 in
Okay.
warfare, because
Yeah.
that's an amazing analogy. But
Mhm.
like you said, when we ask men and women, so what are they doing? So the
Mhm.
consent form is signed, but what are they doing?
Yeah, it's the other side of the coin. We ask them, how many moments is God in your life? And the typical answer is, well, all of them. And then we say, well, okay, how about sharing 3 from yesterday?
Mm-hmm.
Silence.
Yeah.
How about 1? So it's like they know, but they don't know what he's up to. They don't know what,
Mhm.
a lot of times, what God's up to. And that's what we want to, like I said, that's sort of the first training you want to go through, recognizing God's presence. So then you can see the presence of the enemy in your life.
Yeah. This is a goofy analogy, but I just noticed a scratch on our floor the other day. Guess what I can't not notice?
On your brand new
Yeah.
refinished
But guess what I
floors.
can't not notice?
That's all you can see now.
That's like, oh my gosh, what? Come on.
Yeah, it's like the dent or scratch on your
That's-
brand new
when
car.
when you see it, you
Yeah.
can't not see it. And that's, listeners, what we're after. We
Mhm.
just want to talk about this in a way that
Mhm.
encourages and equips you for the life you're living, for the battle that you are in.
Mhm.
I think there's some great films, actually, SJ, that really encompass this, that really deliver this. Let's talk about those for just a minute.
Sure. Yeah. Ones I was just talking with another member of the team, Cole,
Mm-hmm.
about was Schindler's List. I mean, you want to talk about evil, and you don't even really start to understand the evil that's going on because it's happening subtly, slowly,
Yeah.
kind of in the background. And then you get to see, unfortunately, what evil was up to all
Mhm.
along. Many of the folks that were there in those little towns, I believe a lot of them didn't know how bad it was.
And what was going on. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Anything with the POW camps, anything
Yes.
World War II like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I want to look away. I want to say, no, I don't want to see any more of
Mm.
that. But there are very sinister forces at work. And I think the stories that tend to bring them into view are stories like Lord of the Rings and The Matrix and Narnia,
Mm-hmm.
when Neo is brought out of the physical realm only, the smaller story,
Mm-hmm.
and he's shown red pill, blue pill, right?
What
He's
reality
shown,
is.
He's shown the larger reality.
Mm-hmm.
And it's going to take training. They got to reconstruct him in some ways. And then he becomes dangerous
Mhm.
against these agents. I mean, The Matrix is a phenomenal depiction of what we're talking about. So if you want some more context or viewing Lord of the Rings,
Yeah.
this is all about Middle Earth.
Right. The in between.
And you've got these little hobbits who, innocent in many ways, naive in every way,
Mm-hmm.
they live in the Shire, they live detached, and yet this war comes to their doorsteps. And they're caught up. A fellowship to protect him, evil will hunt him,
Yeah.
and there's this destiny in a journey. I mean, it's a phenomenal depiction of the angelic hosts, right? The elves and the orcs
Mm-hmm.
being demonic.
Light and dark.
Dark, yeah.
That
Rivendell.
is a clear-cut example.
Rivendell and
There's
the,
no
and, the,
doubt.
and the light and the
Yeah.
flowing water and the
Yeah.
waterfalls, and then you got
All gray
Mordor.
and dark and dank and
Yeah.
rotting and just nasty.
yeah. And then I think C.S. Lewis's precious Narnia
Oh yeah.
children's
Mhm.
books,
Right.
where every one is a journey between good and evil and becoming, and the characters are becoming and learning from Aslan and some other oriented characters, but most of the characters in those books are not oriented, and they become by
Along
the final
way.
chapters.
Right.
And so those are the metaphors,
And,
right?
I
Those are
mean-
the illustrations.
They get lured in along the way. Edmund gets
Oh, yeah.
lured in by the White Witch
He becomes
and
part of the mission
becomes
now.
yeah.
It's to go get our brother,
Yeah, because he's becoming an agent for evil, and he doesn't even understand what he's gotten himself
Yeah.
into.
She's going to use him
That's right.
to get to the others and offer them this false identity, false kingdom, false role
Yeah.
within Narnia, all the while captive to her bidding. It's so true. We both are big fans. One more illustration, metaphor. I mean, World War II, and I want to make the point before we
Right.
talk about it. One of the things that we've come to understand is that what's happening in the spiritual realm is being played out in the physical realm.
Mm-hmm.
They're so connected that there is war in the heavenlies and in the spiritual realm. We'll get to that throughout the podcast. Hey, you're going to have to hang with us to
Right.
get to how that part works and how that looks. Satan, third of the angels, all of that. But we're talking about right now just kind of what we're experiencing, and that we are experiencing something that's worth examining more deeply
Mm-hmm.
and exploring more. So when you think about all the sin that's happening in the world, all the evil that's trafficking in the world, there's a conflict in the spiritual realm, and it plays out in the physical realm.
Right.
That's how we are to understand this. So one of the biggest physical realm conflicts of all time, World War II. How do you see that depicting this idea, this reality, the truth that we live in the middle of, a conflict in the spiritual realm, physical realm between these two kingdoms?
Yeah, the word that comes to mind immediately is brutality. There was a brutality to the Axis powers, the Blitzkrieg. They would roll over countries.
Yeah.
I mean, they rolled through countries and destroyed anything that stood in their way. And if you didn't want to get destroyed, you got to be used by that power, that entity. You got pressed into service, you got thrown a uniform and a rifle, and now you're a part of this evil that's taking over the land.
Yeah, awful. And it evolved. You know, it went unchecked. It was a different day then.
Sure.
News traveled slowly.
Oh, yeah.
And you had to have embassies and, you know, opportunities to observe and then report. You know, I mean, now with the technology, we're being observed everywhere all the time.
Oh, yeah. Instantly,
and
you know about it. Yeah.
But I think the World War II piece, where there's such an oppression,
Right.
here's one country and its ruler, leader, literally trying to enslave other people to do their bidding.
Yeah.
We just saw 1917.
World War I.
World War I. Things were ripe within Germany for there to be a voice that would sway the opinions of the people of we were mistreated, we were mishandled, we're entitled. And so, you know, how does a nation follow a Hitler? That's how. Not propaganda. I mean, a delivery of a lie that absolutely is pressing upon, we're the ones that have been oppressed. We're the ones that have been mistreated.
It was less than 20 years after the end of the war to end all wars is what World War I was referred to.
Yeah.
So less than 20 years later, Hitler is starting to come to power, and they were in the midst of a catastrophic economic crisis. And so when someone that stands up and can be strong and proud to be a German in this case, he's going to be followed by people that are really clueless as to what is really going on. Of course, we have the benefit of hindsight.
Yeah,
They
absolutely.
didn't.
Yeah.
You know,
And it didn't mean every German citizen
No, of course
or even
not.
everyone in the army. We have documented
that's right.
Valkyrie and these officers who started to really see what they were doing.
And on the other side of that coin, there were first and second generation immigrants to the United States who went back to fight to Germany.
Right.
So
The
it was
motherland,
it was a very confusing, difficult time, but to get swept up into that, no one knew, except for maybe a few select, how insidious the plan really was. There were a few that were close, you know, to the leaders, to Hitler and other Axis leaders that knew what the plan was all along. Not many.
Yeah.
It's this darkness. We're going to use subterfuge and convince people that they're doing a good thing when really they're doing an evil thing.
That's so well said. When when that gets infused into the drama that we're living in and can pull that part of us that can be pulled towards absolute irrational, awful things that on a day you're thinking clearly that just doesn't.
But when you're starving and you get promised bread, you're going to follow them.
And these are the people to blame.
Mm-hmm.
That's judgments, curses. And then there's this place in the physical realm where warfare is being played out all over the planet.
Mm-hmm.
I believe it's worth noting that we live in a spiritual warfare and it gets played out in the physical realm.
Yeah. And the other side of that World War II coin, of course, is, the Allies were bent on freedom and freeing, enslaved masses. So
yes,
there's a rescue coming. There's a redemption coming.
And all those good stories have those. Absolutely. Right. So, hey, we'll take a break. We'll be right back and step back into warfare.
Hey, podcast listeners, it's SJ again. Just wanted to make sure you all know about 2 major events we have coming up soon. We don't want you to miss out on the chance to sign up and experience a weekend that just might change the trajectory of your life. The first one I want to talk to you about briefly is the Heart of a Warrior Allies Advance. During the weekend, we'll explore the masculine journey and the glory of your life, how you uniquely bear God's image, and the redemptive friendships available when a man meets allies and brothers who will fight beside him for freedom. The format of the weekend includes small group dimension and conversations while continuing to offer critical moments of time alone with God. We hope you'll get away and hear God's voice, pursue more healing, more restoration, and invite the Father to validate and initiate you as a beloved son, a warrior heart, and a good king. The Zoe Heart of a Warrior Allies Advance is coming up at March 19th through the 22nd at the Young Life Rockbridge Camp in Goshen, Virginia. And the Advance Weekend is designed for Heart of a Warrior Encounter alumni. And that's the next event I want to talk to you about is the Heart of a Warrior Encounter. And during this weekend, we have 3 main objectives: help a man get his heart back, teach him how to fight, and show him where the battles are. To see Christ come for a man's heart and what God is up to in validating a man, initiating him and calling him into the larger story is truly a glorious thing. It's a fierce journey for every man, but one that needs to be taken. So I would invite you to join the squadrons of men who are hungry and thirsty for more. The kingdom needs more men who know what it is to walk deeply with God. Come join us April 30th through May 3rd at the Heart of a Warrior Encounter Weekend. Again, at Camp Rockbridge in Goshen, Virginia. Come join us and be one of the men who is seeking and finding more. And there is more. For more details and further information, visit zoe.org/events. And I hope to see you there.
Welcome back to the Exploring More podcast. SJ and I are talking about warfare, and even in this first segment, it's so challenging to not get lost in the weeds.
Oh, man.
And all the details, which we hope to cover in the series.
Yeah.
I want to go back to, how the scriptures really speak to this battle. Revelation 12, what was revealed to the disciple John when he was given the assignment of writing all this down on an island, or he had some solitude and time to do it. God then unveils this storyline. It's not just the story of the end of time, it's actually the story of the time. It goes all the way back into the birth of Jesus, the Messiah. Revelation 12, 7-9 says, "Then war broke out in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon and his angels fought back. But he was not strong enough, and they lost their place in heaven. The great dragon was hurled down, the ancient serpent called the devil, or Satan, who leads the whole world astray. He was hurled to the earth, and his angels with him." Goes on to say, to wage war against mankind.
Sure, the whole world.
Yeah.
I would assume that whole there means whole, right? So in its entirety, who leads the whole world astray? So the good news about that is if he's leading you astray, you don't have to follow him, right? You're not compelled to do that. You can decide once you become aware
Yeah.
of what's going on, that you have an option whether to follow that leader or not,
Right.
or follow a different leader.
You said something earlier, SJ, that's good as we move around this landscape, that we get to see some of these stories, World War II, Lord of the Rings, The Matrix. We see how they end. We see the rescue. We see the allies. We see the journey and the battles that it's going to take to reclaim what's lost. And I think that's our encouragement as we live in these war-torn days. And our experience here in America right now is very different than somebody living in the Middle East, somebody living in the former Soviet Union. I mean, there's so many countries there that are still in conflict.
Central, South America,
yes.
Sure.
Africa. There's a lot of wars going on. And when you live in one, you live as if you are. You live that way. And so when you're in an experience that's a little more cushy and comfortable, like the West and like America, which we have our conflicts. I'm not diminishing that. That's not the point. I'm saying in the spiritual realm, though, as believers, as kingdom citizens, most of us don't live with the reality of being in a war.
Yeah, most of us live like we're plugged into the Matrix still.
Yeah.
Where you're just blissfully unaware of what's going on.
Naivety. When you move in the story, I want to talk about two things before we wrap up today. Genesis 3 and Revelation 22. Revelation 22 is the end of the story when we get the garden back. Well, before that is Revelation 19. Obviously, 19 comes before 22, but in Revelation 19, we see the great passage about Jesus, the Messiah, coming back, robe dipped in blood, white horse, leading the angel armies. I mean, even the language, what does it imply? Armies to come and wage war against Satan once and for all. And to enter into those last 3 chapters of Revelation, it shows over and over again about end times warfare and this enemy-occupied territory. Yes, Jesus has set us free from the penalty of sin, but he hasn't set us free from the presence of it.
Yeah, that's true.
This thing in China that's going on. I mean, here's this flu virus, and they're trying to contain it, and they're not yet having much success. So we go back to the garden where this virus started in Genesis 3, and you jump from Revelation 12. You understand that he's been hurled down to earth in defeat, and he shows up in Genesis 3. I mean, it's a really wild series of events. You go to Revelation 12, the end of the Bible, and then you can start at Genesis 3 with the beginning of our story.
Right.
And here we go.
Right.
You know, what does this look like when you see Satan pulling on the image bearers, pulling them away from the Father? And the 2 questions that I would get to the end, SJ, of that passage, right, when they realized what they did, and how true is that? It's so often in my life, it's on the other side.
Oh, yeah.
That I realized I shouldn't have done that.
Right.
I should have done this.
Yeah. Soren Kierkegaard, right?
Yeah.
You have to live life forward, but you can only understand it looking back.
At the fall, the rescue mission really begins as God escorts Adam and Eve out of the garden. But after, he does that after he asks them these 2 questions. Where are you? And who told you that? Where are you? And who told you that? And I never saw the who told you that until just a few years ago. And when they're hiding, they've created cover, they're hiding, and this idea that God's asking them, do you know what you've done? Do you know where you're at? And then letting them explain themselves, right?
Yeah, which is just painfully smarmy and, oh gosh, it's bad. I've done the same thing. I've been Adam in that regard before. Right. I said before, about how we're kind of blissfully unaware to the battle that's going on. Many, many folks are. And at the same time, they're not unaware or unaffected by the sin that's all around them. They're feeling the effects of it. They're engaging in it in most circumstances,
right?
Myself included. The greatest military tactic by the forces of evil in our current setting, in the in-between, Jesus coming and then leaving, and then the second coming's on its way. But I think the greatest tactic that the enemy uses is to convince people that it's not real.
Yeah.
That it's not there, that it's not him.
And if that's his greatest tactic, then his reasoning is to blame it on you.
Right.
To blame it all on you.
Sure.
And even blame's not the right conversation.
To hang it on you.
But who's responsible?
Yeah.
Accusation, guilt, and shame. I think in wrapping up, a couple things. One, we've come to treat sin as behavior rather than motivations. And that's something that we've spent a lot of time exploring. And there's a lot of other podcasts about it, directly and indirectly.
Right.
But the invitation, where am I?
Jesus talks about it.
And who told me that?
Right. Jesus talks about it. He says, when you lust for a woman in your heart, you've already committed adultery.
Yeah. It's not the physical.
It's the motivation.
It's not the physical act.
Right.
It's the spiritual reality.
Yeah.
He brings that together.
When you have anger,
point.
You've already murdered the person. And he's saying that because he wants to get to the root of your motivations.
And teach you about how this works
Yeah.
and what the warfare looks like and how we actually side with the enemy. And you said it earlier, unbeknownst to us, that we're responsible, but we are getting help to align with this kingdom of darkness who wants to use us to wound and hurt others. That's where we're going to go in the next session about getting free from that.
That's right.
And stop being a target and used to become a son and a daughter where you bring power and authority, you bring identity, you bring freedom and life because you've experienced it for yourself. And that's worth talking about.
As we land this plane on this first episode about warfare, you've heard us say it before if you've heard our podcast before, but if you're new to the Exploring More podcast, I just want to say, stop saying that God is using you.
Yeah.
Stop saying that God is using you. How do you feel when someone tells you that you've used them?
Yeah.
How do you feel when you've been used by someone? It's a form of abuse.
It's not very loving.
No.
But yet we've taken it as a badge of honor in the kingdom.
And I get the heart behind it. I do, but words matter.
Yeah.
They really do. Words matter. Yeah. Write to us at exploringmore@zoe.org if you want to spar about that
Wrestle with that a little bit.
We will. And if you've got any questions about spiritual warfare, anything that we've talked about, email us at exploringmore@zoe.org. We'd love to hear from you. I want to encourage you to visit zoe.org, our website. At our store, we have a ton of free resources for you. One of them is the Kingdom Map that gives clarity to this, but it makes it a little more overwhelming all at the same time. But it's a great resource for you to pick up.
Yeah. So we'll see you next time on the Exploring More podcast. We hope you have enjoyed this episode of Exploring More. The landing page for this podcast is zoe.org/podcast. That's ZOWEH.org/podcast, where you can find the show notes and various platforms to which we broadcast. You can also find us and the Life of More by visiting Zoe on YouVersion Bible app, Right Now Media, our Facebook page, and Zoe on Instagram and Twitter. Remember, with God there is always more, and you were made for more.